There is a single sentence in the Gospel of John that has puzzled scholars, archaeologists, and believers for 2,000 years. It appears just once, almost as a passing detail buried inside the crucifixion account. John 19:41. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. A garden, right there, at the site of the crucifixion and burial of Jesus Christ. One sentence, no further explanation. And for 2 millennia, nobody could prove it was real. Until April 2025, because a team of archaeologists excavating beneath the floor of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem pulled soil samples from layers of earth that had not been disturbed in 2,000 years. They sent those samples to a laboratory, and what came back stopped the scientific team in their tracks. Ancient olive pits, grape seeds, pollen from grapevines, all of it dating back approximately 2,000 years. All of it pointing to one extraordinary conclusion. There really was a garden there, exactly where the Gospel of John said it would be. If you are new to Calibrated Past, we cover real archaeological discoveries, peer-reviewed science, and the genuine mysteries of ancient history. No speculation, no pseudoscience, just the evidence. If that is your kind of channel, hit subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next. Now, back to Jerusalem. How did we get here? And what exactly does this discovery prove? And not prove? That is what we are going to work through carefully today, because this story is more nuanced and more remarkable than most headlines have given it credit for. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre sits in the Christian quarter of Jerusalem's Old City. It is one of the most sacred sites in all of Christianity, the place where, according to Christian tradition, Jesus Christ was crucified, buried, and resurrected. The church has stood in various forms since the 4th century, when the Roman Emperor Constantine ordered its construction in 326 AD, at the urging of his mother, Saint Helena. It took nearly a decade to build, and was consecrated in 335 AD. Since then it has been destroyed, rebuilt, expanded, and fought over by competing religious communities for 17 centuries. But beneath all of that history, beneath the incense and the stone and the centuries of pilgrims, something was waiting, something nobody had properly looked for, because nobody believed the floor could ever be moved. In 2022, everything changed. The 3 Christian communities that share control of the church, the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, the custody of the Holy Land representing the Franciscans, and the Armenian Patriarchate, finally agreed to allow a major restoration project. The floor of the ancient basilica was deteriorating. Something had to be done, and that agreement, reached after decades of disagreement between communities who could barely agree on which door to use, opened a door nobody expected, because fixing the floor meant lifting it, and lifting it meant seeing what was underneath, for the first time in centuries. The excavation was led by Professor Francesca Romana Stasola of Sapienza University of Rome, in collaboration with the Israel Antiquities Authority. Professor Stasola described it as the most significant archaeological excavation at this site in nearly 200 years, and within months the team was finding things nobody had anticipated. But here is the question that nobody had dared ask before the floor came up. What if the physical evidence to support one of history's most debated biblical details had been sitting right beneath our feet all along, perfectly preserved, waiting? What is underneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is not simply ancient rubble. It is a layered record of human history, stretching back thousands of years. The team found ceramics, metals, glass, artifacts documenting the occupation of the site from the Iron Age onward. They found evidence of a quarry, a working stone-cutting operation that predated the Christian era entirely. And then, in the layers above the quarry, in the period just before the area became a cemetery in the 1st century, they found the garden. Seeds and pollen extracted from soil samples and subjected to archaeobotanical analysis told a clear story. Olive trees had grown here, grapevines had grown here, low stone walls suggested organized cultivation, not wild plants growing randomly, but a deliberately maintained agricultural space. The area, as Professor Stasola confirmed to the Times of Israel, was outside the city walls at the time of Jesus, which is exactly consistent with what the Gospels describe. A garden, outside the city. A tomb, in the garden. Can you feel the weight of that for a moment? A detail written down 2,000 years ago, dismissed by many as literary embellishment, as poetic framing, confirmed not by faith, not by tradition, but by ancient pollen in a soil sample. But here is where Calibrated Past does something most channels covering this story refuse to do. And it matters, because excitement is one thing, and precision is another. What exactly does this discovery actually prove? And what questions does it leave completely unanswered? What the archaeobotanical evidence confirms is that a garden, an agricultural space with olive trees and grapevines, existed at this location in the 1st century. That is real. That is verified. It directly echoes John 19:41 in a way that no previous scientific investigation had been able to do. That is genuinely significant. What it does not confirm, and what the researchers themselves are careful to state, is that this is definitively the site of the crucifixion and burial of Jesus. Radiocarbon testing on the organic material had not yet been completed at the time of the announcement. The dating comes from the archaeological stratigraphy, the layers of soil, rather than from direct carbon testing of the seeds and pollen themselves. That testing is still ongoing. Results have not yet been published. What it also does not address is the deeper question historians and archaeologists have debated for generations. Is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre actually built over the right location? The tradition identifying this site goes back to the 4th century. Most mainstream scholars consider it credible, but it is not universally settled. An honest engagement with this discovery means acknowledging that the garden finding, remarkable as it is, does not by itself resolve that debate. So where does the honest assessment land? It lands somewhere genuinely extraordinary, even with all its caveats intact. Not proof of a miracle, not confirmation of resurrection, but something almost as remarkable in its own right. Archaeological evidence that a specific small detail recorded in an ancient text was physically real. A garden outside the city walls of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. The text said it was there. The soil says it was there. Those two things now agree. Consider what it took for this evidence to survive at all. 2,000 years of construction above it. Roman temples built over the site by Emperor Hadrian in 135 AD, deliberately, historians believe, to erase the Christian memory of the location. Then Constantine demolishing those temples and building the first church over the same ground in 326 AD. Then centuries of rebuilding, fire, earthquake, and crusader renovation. Layer upon layer of history pressing down on that ancient soil. And yet the seeds survived, the pollen survived. Sealed beneath stone floors, undisturbed through every upheaval above them, perfectly preserved in the dry Jerusalem earth. Waiting. The fact that this evidence exists at all after everything that happened above it is, in its own quiet way, as remarkable as what the evidence actually says. Professor Stasola told Fox News Digital that the team expects many more surprises as the excavation continues. The work is ongoing. More layers remain unexcavated. More soil samples are being processed. The discovery of the garden is, in her words, only the beginning of what this site still has to tell us. Think about what that means. One of the most visited, most studied, most prayed over locations on the surface of the earth. And we are still, in 2025, finding things beneath it that were completely unknown. Things that have been sitting quietly in the dark, preserved in seeds and pollen and ancient soil, for 2,000 years, waiting for someone to finally lift the floor and ask the right questions. The stones beneath Christianity's holiest church have been speaking for 2,000 years. We are only just beginning to understand what they are saying. And if the archaeobotanical results are only the beginning, what comes next from those unexcavated layers could change this story completely. Next week, we travel back in time, not to a sacred site, but to a political one. Because in 2025, archaeologists found a small clay tablet at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And when they translated it, what they were holding turned out to be a 2,700-year-old overdue payment notice, sent from the most powerful empire on earth, directly to the King of Judah. Ancient bureaucracy. Real consequences. That is our next video. Calibrated Past, where ancient evidence meets modern science.